welcome to another episode of the CEO Peak. I am Dave Osh, the CEO of Varlinks that sponsors this show. We transform the invisible human tendencies that inhibit business performance in high complexity. Our purpose is to evolve leadership effectiveness so that together we create a ripple effect of unity in the world. The CEO Peak Show is devoted to addressing the leadership team challenges that get in the way of achieving business results. We invite insightful and inspirational CEOs who are thought leaders in advancing their team effectiveness. Such a leader is our guest today, Paula Schneider, the CEO of Susan G. Komen, a global movement that over 30 years has led the way in funding of almost $1 billion, groundbreaking research, community health initiatives, and advocacy programs in local communities across the US and in more than 30 countries, serving millions of people. Paula joined Komen 3.5 years ago after serving as a president and CEO of American Apparel, the largest apparel manufacturers in the United States with 260 retail stores globally, and former president at Warnaco Swimwear Group. Hello, Paula, and welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave.
You know, I'm curious to learn more about what did drive you to make such a shift from to a nonprofit after such a brilliant career in the apparel industry.
Well, I was in the apparel industry for many, many, many moons. And during that time, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I was working at Warnaco and running Speedo and getting ready for the 2008 Olympics with, Michael Phelps and the whole thing. And in 2007, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. So for me, it was sort of a personal thing. I stayed in the for-profit sector for quite a few years after that. But then I just decided that there was one day where an opportunity came up. And I was then running Seven for All Mankind. And I was at a retail conference where I was getting an award as being one of the top female retailers in the country. And I got up to give a speech and I spoke about how I was most empowered when I was the least physically powerful. And that was when I had breast cancer, because if you're used to being large and in charge, whether you run a business or a family or whatever it may be, and you get a diagnosis like that, you have to actually ask for people to help you. And there's a lot of empowerment in being able to do that. It's not easy. And so I got up, I gave the speech. It was from the heart. It was really more, I was supposed to talk about empowerment in retail, and I literally had nothing. So I got up and I talked about something that meant a lot more for me. And when I sat back down next to a friend of mine, she said to me, wow, while you were speaking, I got an email from a friend of mine who's a recruiter out of Dallas, and they're looking for a new CEO of Susan G. Komen. And would you ever consider that? And I said, yes, I would. And it took me about 2 seconds. And literally, that was a Thursday. On Friday, I had lunch with my husband. We talked about that, and which required a physical move, leaving a very lucrative job, all of those things. And on Monday, whether I got the job or even an interview for the job, I left the company I was working for. So, it was just time for a change. It was a radical shift for me.
Wow. When we have this phrase, defining moment, that's really kind of a defining moment.
It couldn't have happened. It was literally like a hammer hitting you, on the head and saying, okay, here's the opportunity. You've always wanted to do something that has been more meaningful for you. My mom died of metastatic disease. My brother died of prostate metastatic. My sister had melanoma. Cancer's been like a central point of our family. And I have 2 daughters. So kind of enough said.
Yeah, so it felt like a calling, right?
Yeah, it was a calling.
It is. And I love actually, it's such a great quote where you felt the most least physically powered. You felt, how can I empower, and how you change your speech just on the spot. And it reminds me of a movie that somebody actually, or a TED Talk, that you come and you prepare for months and then suddenly you change in a split of a moment. But despite the fact that you work for a nonprofit, you're still running, it's an organization that runs globally So what in the context, actually, what did you learn from this different environment of a nonprofit and a profit? What's there actually? What lessons you can take from both worlds that you can bring?
I think it's great for people that have run for profits to run a non for profit because it's so different in a lot of ways. And I think when I first got here, it felt like things were moving very, very, very slowly. And, I would say, okay, in my mind's eye, I'm thinking, all the rest of my jobs, when people would get frustrated or concerned or whatever it was, I would say, hey, Kate, you're not curing cancer here. But here we actually are curing cancer. So the expediency with which we should be working needs to really speed up. There was more energy around getting the last gene shipped out in a quarter than there was around curing cancer, I felt. And so we really needed to pull together as a team and work on what our strategies are and move very quickly. And I feel like the team has been phenomenal and really made great strides in the past few years. And we've moved very quickly as a unit. And I think we're doing a really good job. It's a complicated business. And I knew nothing about it, right? I came in and I'm fashion girl from, running all of these apparel companies or retailers for many, many years. And now all of a sudden I'm running a nonprofit and I'm running a nonprofit that is based in science. And I'm not a scientist, not a doctor, so I have to lean on those around me to teach me. The only thing that I had was I had breast cancer, but that doesn't mean you know everything about it. I certainly know a lot more now than I did before, but you really had to listen and learn. And then put some strategies in place and execute those strategies and have accountability because I truly believe people are happier when they understand what is expected of them, regardless of whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit business.
Yes, you took the speed as one of the comparison that you did and the importance of you have a stronger purpose, but it was not equal to the speed or the sense of urgency that you had between the two, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what did you learn, especially when it comes to building leadership teams and you take them globally? It's kind of you work in one industry and you shift it to a different industry, but are there any commonalities in terms of building and developing a leadership team globally?
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, people have skill sets. A lot of the skill sets are transferable. Not everyone who's in the nonprofit space has started and always been in a nonprofit space. So it's just really, it goes back to building the strategies and understanding what you want to accomplish. And then once you do, once you can articulate what that is, what your North Star is, and what your goals are, and put some numbers around it, and then add some data to it, and have some accountability, then people will naturally rise. And it's hard when you are working with different cultures for anyone who's run an organization or a business that has been global. You have to understand the culture mores in each area. You have to understand what blows people's hair back and what offends. And you have to, I think, listen and be humble to learn because, you're not going to go in there like you're the great hope and you've got it all figured out because you don't. No matter where you are and what you do, and this is not just for this organization, this is for any organization I've ever run. The laws are different, the rules are different, the cultures are different, the corporate culture is different. So it's really just relating to people as people and human beings and try to understand, walk a mile in their shoes, understand what they're trying to do.
So how do you actually overcome those differences in culture? And some cultural differences can come into corporate cultures in different countries. And then you have this wish to have one corporate culture across the globe, which I struggled for years, actually. I always expected to have, I don't know, in Turkey or in South Korea, the same corporate culture we had in Hong Kong. And it was very difficult. It was actually mission impossible to bring. We needed to kind of tweak and allow some kind of space. How did you create this space, or what was your choice when you do alignment in culture?
I think it's over communicating, really. Because first of all, you do have to get some buy in that everybody is working towards the same North Star. And once you do that, then I think there's also a camaraderie that starts to exist. And you have to get inclusiveness where you're asking them, if this is where we want to go and this is our North Star, how do we get there? And what do you think is the best way to get there? And it's not always a democracy, right? Because otherwise it would become chaotic and I don't know that you get a whole lot done. But you got to take the input. If you're going to ask the questions, then you certainly have to listen to the answers. Find out, take polls, understand where the pain points are, and then see what you can do to help. And I think, especially in this role where we are sort of the servant leaders, right? Because what we're doing is taking care of patients, regardless of where they live. And that has to be our North Star, that we're going to find ways to help with people that have cancer today, help with people that research to hopefully stop people from getting cancer tomorrow, or certainly metastasis. And once you understand that that is your commonality, that everyone's trying to get there, then, ask for input. I'm really bullish on like poking and saying, okay, well, do you really believe that? Or are you just telling me? Right? Because don't just tell me, because there's no benefit for me. And I can be persuaded. If you have a better point of view or are more entrepreneurial, or there's new ways for you to think of doing things, I am all in. I'm more than happy to listen to it. I remember once when I was working at Speedo, was one of the Warnaco brands, and Speedo's a global brand. And I hired this kid, and he told me that he got a master's in entrepreneurship. And I thought, wow, that is the greatest thing ever. I don't know how old he was, maybe 25. And I said to him, we have some really significant problems that we're facing at the leadership level, but I want to bring you into our senior leadership group, our ELT. And I want you to hear these problems, and I want you to come back and come with some thoughts on how you would solve them. And the kid was scared out of his mind, but he did it. And there were a couple of his suggestions and his thought processes that we used, because it was a new perspective, and I think if you allow yourself to listen and to hear. When I was running American Apparel, we had very divergent cultures there. We had, some of the older people, and then who were, in some senior positions, myself included. And we had the average age of the people that worked there was 28. And what we did for the management team is I brought people, and there were people that were there from different countries as well. We all went to an escape room in LA. And an escape room, if you haven't been to one, is one where they give you very few clues, but you have to figure out how you get out of the room. And it's not as though the room is like claustrophobic or anything. There's all kinds of really cool things that you do. And I'm thinking, I'm pretty smart, and I'm going to put my, I'm with the smart people, and, I'm going to go and we're going to figure this out. And we were all, throwing crap at each other, saying, we're going to get out and you're not. And we had 4 rooms going. And I will tell you that I'd still be in that room if it wasn't for the 28-year-olds. Because they came at things completely different way. I was astounded with how they thought. And it was the most enlightening exercise in team culture that I have ever had happen to me. I thought we were going to teach them, and, we can bring them along. And oh my God, they were brilliant. And it really gave me a new perspective on how people think.
Yeah. And I have it with my kids too. They're all in the 20s, and I see how they see the world differently, and in many ways better than me. And I learned a lot from them.
And hopefully they trade on hope,
Yeah. I wish my parents would learn from me. I'm 60, but they still are not willing to learn from me. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how the generation changed. But I really love this example of diversity of age, and try to enrich a very experienced senior leadership team with some young kiddo that come and bring not a lot of experience, but different perspective. I'm curious, if you now roll back and turn the clock back to do again the position that you did before as the CEO of American Apparel, with the new experiences from what you gained recently with nonprofit, what you would have done differently?
Well, that's a tough one, because, first of all, you can never go back, right? But I think American Apparel was a bucket of crazy. And it was the most challenging work environment, where things happened there that would never have happened in any other work environment ever. And, it was part of pop culture in LA for many, many years. And, the founder, who was the creative founder, who sort of went off the rails, but the most creative place that I have ever been, as far as just, again, when you had, groups of 28 was the average age. That means you had from 23 to 33, right? And just listening to the perspective and seeing, I don't know that I would have or could have, because there were all kinds of financial implications. It was a massive, massive turnaround, and I had to take it through a planned bankruptcy to try and save all the jobs, et cetera. So that was a difficult one. That wasn't even dealing with culture as much as it was with just the financial ramifications of where we were. So, but I think you learn from every single role. Like that one taught me that I am more fierce, and I was there to try and do the very best I could. And regardless of what happened, and there could be fires literally burning all around me, I stayed calm. You take that with you. Every place I've ever worked, I've taken something with me. When I was at Warnaco, was when I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was in the middle of a massive restructure because I'm kind of, I was doing a lot of turnarounds. And it was a massive restructure where we had to go from our own factories to a outsourced factory based model. And there were a lot of jobs that were going to be terminated and lost, which is always sad. But I got diagnosed and I asked my doctor, I said, look, I'm in the middle of a giant restructure. If I wait 3 weeks so I can get through this, will I die? And he said, no, but you probably shouldn't wait any longer than that. So on Monday and Tuesday of that week, I went through this massive restructure where there were hundreds of people that had to lose their roles. And that was really horrible. On Wednesday, I told my team I had cancer. And on Thursday, I went into chemo. So, you learn what you're made of when things don't go your way. And you learn how to be strong and put one foot in front of the other. So I'm hoping that I'll always be a learner because life is so interesting. And even now during the pandemic and, the new, whatever the new normal is going to be, and it's not going to be the same normal for any of us, but whatever that's going to be, and you have to bob and weave and you have to figure it out and you're working remotely. And there's so many exigencies and so many changes that have happened in the last 10 months, a year to every organization and every company that it's been such a wild Bronco ride and you have to hold on and figure out how you plot your course and stay the course.
Yeah. I love the vulnerability that you bring to this interview. Look, the CEO is a tough job.
It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy.
I remember at American Apparel, I had a workforce that was very concerned because I had to furlough people and they weren't making enough to live. So I became part of the picket line. And when I first saw my face on a picket sign, I was like, wow, all I'm really trying to do here is to save jobs. Because I got there and we had 6 weeks of cash flow before we were going to hit the rocks. So I pulled every single lever I possibly could to save money, to save jobs, and to save the company. But it didn't feel like that on the other end. And no matter how you articulate that, it becomes, if you're trying to live and you can't, then you're going to fight. And I understand. I completely understand. But, my goal was to try and save as many jobs as I possibly could.
So I wonder what across industries, with your experience, have you seen any commonality of the biggest challenge that senior leadership teams face in leading organizations and teams? What do you think is the biggest challenge of teams today, leadership teams specifically?
I think, we're struggling with it at Komen in that we strive for inclusivity, right? And to make sure that everyone understands what we're doing and we're transparent and we work really hard to make sure that everyone knows what strategies we're working on. But what happens is sometimes you get mired down so much in the need to know that you can't get through your day because you have so many meetings of all the things you need to know versus a strategy where you just got to give some autonomy. Your folks have to be able to give autonomy to their folks, and nobody needs to know everything. Because I think we've swung a little bit too far because now you're trying to get through all the work that you have to do in a day, but you have so many meetings because we've created this structure of inclusivity. So, it will switch back a little bit just by virtue of, it's going to have to because there's not as many hours in the day as we would need to keep everyone informed of everything. So that I think is an easy trap for CEOs to fall into. And I've been on the other side of that where they didn't know enough and then there wasn't enough communication and enough transparency and, where you try your best to find this balance. But I think for CEOs now, there's a few things that are going on. First of all, when you went to a remote workforce, which most everyone did, and leadership was really important this year, and you had to make sure you were over communicating and telling and explaining and getting buy-in. because you're not all physically in the room together, and you can't read the body language and all of that. And then I think we went a little too far. So now we're going to have to sort of right size and get somewhere in the middle there. So I think that that's a big challenge. And then the other challenge, that I was on a panel of CEOs, and these are top CEOs in the world, and they're not, I was the only nonprofit, I think, on there. And one of the questions was, where do you get involved and where do you make public statements, especially in this world that is fraught right now with challenge, right? And it's very bipartisan, or it's very partisan. And, do you go out and talk about social injustice, or do you, where do you draw the line? What is expected of you and what is the right thing to do? Because regardless of what you say, you're going to have people that agree with you and people that don't agree with you. But what is your responsibility to do that? And there's a lot of robust conversation around that.
And what is your thought about it?
Well, I think you're as open. I think you need to sort of stay in your lane a little bit, right? I do think that it's very important for the CEO statesman now to be a part of the conversation. Like for social injustice, and we deal all the time and have for many years from a very authentic place of health inequality, right? Health inequities. And that if you're a Black woman, you're 40% more likely to die than if you're white, if you have breast cancer, if you get breast cancer. And so that's unacceptable, right? So those are social inequalities that exist. So we have to weigh in there because that's super important for us. And if there are other issues that fall into that same genre, then we will. It's like COVID. When COVID came around and Black and brown people were dying at a higher rate than white people, I had to step up and speak up because this is what's happening. And this is, it's good that there's a spotlight that's shining on it. But then, you have to decide if those are things that are in my wheelhouse and things that I feel very comfortable for us as an organization to come out and talk about. But we can't be partisan. I will have my own political beliefs, as will everyone else, but that isn't what we're about as an organization. We cannot be partisan. We care about women and women getting breast cancer, and men too, and keeping families together. And that has to be our North Star. It can't be what Paula thinks or cares about. It has to be what the organization thinks and cares about. And sometimes there's a fine line of trying to figure out, do I want to jump in on this argument because it's me? Or is it the best thing to do for the organization? And I always run everything that I'm thinking by my comms people so I can get there, read on it. Like, should we or should we not?
Yeah. Such a beautiful conversation, Paula. I think we could have continued for another half an hour or more even. I really love the other side of inclusivity because, everyone is talking about how to be inclusive, but when it comes to information and so on, you can go on the other side and spend the whole day trying to get involved.
You can bury your people in work, and that's not what you want to do either. There has to be some hierarchy where people make decisions without, and have the opportunity to make those decisions. And for organizations in transformation, like our organization just went from an affiliate model to a single incorporation. So we're in huge transformation mode. So we want to over communicate, but then everyone doesn't need to be in every single meeting that has to do with the single incorporation. So there's 100 of those examples, but when you're watching it and all of a sudden people get bogged down, then you start to lose really good people because there's just too much work to do. And it's not as though we're going to do anything less. It's not like we're going to give up a bunch of things that we're already doing because we've laid out the strategy. We're going to execute to the strategy. You just have to empower people to do their jobs. Yeah.
It will save a lot of time too. So, Paula, thank you so much for taking the time and being with us today. That was great.
It's so my pleasure. It was lovely chatting.
And thank you for watching the show, and I'm looking forward to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.